Picture this. You're a eunuch in the Imperial Harem, tasked with enforcing a rule so bizarre it defies modern logic. Every night, before the emperor retired to his chambers, you had to verify one shocking detail about his chosen concubine, a ritual that would make any outsider shudder. What was this strange custom, and why was it so ruthlessly enforced? The eunuch's hands shook as he examined the concubine's wrists. One missed blemish or feverish pulse meant his head would roll before dawn. These men were the invisible sentinels of the harem, standing between the emperor and any unseen danger. Their authority extended far beyond simply opening doors. They decided who was pure enough to enter the imperial bedchamber. Each chosen concubine endured a hushed inspection behind silk screens. Eunuchs checked for rashes, scrutinized nail beds for discoloration, even noted the rhythm of her breathing. Some accounts described them pressing damp cloths to the skin, watching for reactions that might indicate poison or illness. Every touch was clinical, every glance calculating. There was no room for error in a system where the emperor's bed was a matter of state security. This brutal precision stemmed from an ancient belief. An impure woman could weaken the emperor's vital essence. Texts warned that a single tainted encounter might drain his strength, invite misfortune, even collapse the mandate of heaven. The concubine wasn't just a lover, she was a vessel for dynastic continuity. Failure was unthinkable. A eunuch who allowed an unworthy woman past the silken curtains would face the 9 familial exterminations. Worse, his disgrace would extend to every eunuch who trained him. The system relied on this shared terror, pressing each man into flawless compliance. Some wept during inspections, knowing they damned a healthy girl if they erred on the side of caution. The inspections didn't end at the bedroom door. Eunuchs waited outside, straining for any cough or gasp from within. A suspicious sound could trigger an immediate interruption, hauling the concubine away for further examination. No moan of pleasure was innocent when the throne's stability hung in the balance. Survival meant noticing what others missed, the slight stickiness of sweat indicating fever, the faint herbal scent masking a skin ailment. Even the concubine's gait as she walked could betray concealed weaknesses. Eunuchs studied these details like scholars memorizing sacred texts, because for them it was a scripture of survival. Absolute obedience came at a cost. Some eunuchs developed nervous twitches from the constant strain. Others secretly warned favored concubines about impending inspections, playing a dangerous game of imperial politics, but most understood the grim equation. One night's mercy could unravel centuries of ritual. And so the inspections continued, generation after generation, as unchanging as the palace walls themselves. The concubine's preparation began at dawn. Servants scrubbed her skin with ground pearls and almond paste until it shone pink and raw. Her hair was soaked in jasmine oil for hours, each strand combed by attendants who'd trained for years in this single task. Every step had meaning. The removal of body hair with golden tweezers wasn't about beauty, but purification. She was being unmade, then remade as something fit for imperial touch. The bathing ritual crossed into sacred ceremony. Eunuchs prepared wooden tubs filled with water from 7 mountain springs, each infused with different herbs: chrysanthemum to calm the humors, peony to brighten the skin, herbs whose names were palace secrets. As she soaked, attendants whispered charms over the water, words meant to cleanse more than flesh. Some concubines later described the scent clinging to them for days, marking them as recently used vessels. No part of her was left unexamined. Servants inspected her teeth with silver picks, tested her breath with scented cloths, even checked the whorls of her ears for wax. Records mentioned tongue inspections, where she'd recite poetry to prove her speech untainted by regional accents. This wasn't about attraction, it was erasure. The ideal concubine had no distinctive traits beyond what pleased the emperor. The final humiliation came in the dressing chamber. Eunuchs watched as layers of silk were arranged just so, the sash tied precisely 3 finger widths below her ribs. The slightest error, a crooked collar, a visible wrinkle, could get her removed from the roster for months. Some concubines practiced standing motionless for hours, learning to sweat without disturbing their makeup. The goal wasn't to look enticing, it was to look effortless. Then came the verification. Female attendants checked for unseen flaws, a scratch hidden under powder, the faintest swelling of an insect bite. One account describes them blowing powdered chalk across the skin to reveal uneven textures. The concubine stood like a statue during this, knowing any flinch might suggest impurity. Her body no longer belonged to her. It was palace property awaiting imperial judgment. The walk to the bedchamber was its own trial. She moved at a measured pace, rehearsed to avoid swaying hips or clicking slippers. Some were made to practice with books balanced on their heads. Every step was choreographed, right down to how she'd kneel at the bedside. By the time the emperor saw her, she wasn't a woman anymore, just a living testament to the system that shaped her. The sand in the hourglass dictated everything. When an emperor entered the bedchamber, 4 senior eunuchs stationed themselves outside with timekeeping instruments. Water clocks measured intervals to the breath, 37 minutes for ordinary visits, 53 if the empress was present. Any longer risked improper attachments forming. Physical contact followed strict parameters. The concubine remained fully clothed, except for a precisely measured slit in her robes, enough for imperial access, not enough for skin-to-skin contact beyond what was necessary. Some dynasties used bamboo frames under the bedding to maintain distance until the crucial moment. Even during intimacy, certain positions were forbidden as too emotionally connective. At the 2/3 mark, the chief eunuch would clear his throat audibly outside the door. This wasn't a suggestion, it was protocol. The emperor's pleasure mattered less than preventing favoritism from taking root. Records show one concubine being dragged away mid-coupling when her allotted time expired. The system tolerated no exceptions. Afterward came the separation rituals. Attendants immediately escorted the concubine to a cleansing bath, while physicians checked the emperor's pulse for irregularities. He wasn't permitted to sleep beside anyone, not even the empress, lest shared dreams create bonds. Some texts describe officials reviewing the encounter later, noting deviations from standard procedure. The rules extended to conversation. Concubines were trained in exactly 7 acceptable topics, all impersonal: auspicious weather, palace renovations, the emperor's recent poems. Asking about his health or expressing personal thoughts could earn immediate dismissal. One Ming dynasty record details a concubine punished for mentioning she liked plum blossoms, seen as attempting to create shared memory. Violations carried brutal consequences. A concubine caught initiating unprompted touch might find herself transferred to laundry service. More severe breaches, whispering private words, hiding menstrual rags, could mean banishment to the cold palaces, where unwanted women slowly went mad in isolated courtyards. The system prized control above all. Even successful encounters were carefully managed. If conception occurred, the concubine immediately lost all future access to prevent sibling rivalries. Her child would be raised by childless senior consorts, severing maternal influence. The message was clear. The emperor's bed was a state institution, not a place for human connection. These protocols weren't about pleasure. They were damage control. By reducing intimacy to scheduled, impersonal transactions, the court hoped to prevent any woman from gaining political leverage through affection. In the end, it created a different problem. Generations of emotionally starved rulers who either rebelled violently against the system or withdrew into paranoid isolation. The bedroom protocols succeeded too well. They protected the throne from concubines, but not from its own dehumanizing logic. Every silk cord in the harem pulled with political tension. The women who entered as concubines quickly learned this wasn't a competition for love. It was a chess game where losing meant watching your family starve. Behind each perfect smile lay calculations. Which eunuch could be bribed with stolen jewelry? Which maid might plant rumors? Which palace official owed your father favors? Younger concubines targeted senior ones with poisoned cosmetics. Veterans faked pregnancies using smuggled rabbit blood. Some secretly studied philosophy or music, knowing intellectual conversation might intrigue a scholar emperor. Others paid physicians to declare rivals infertile. The hallways buzzed with carefully orchestrated accidental encounters. A concubine practicing chin zither, where the emperor took his walks. Another spontaneously reciting poetry in his favorite garden. Eunuchs held disproportionate power in this ecosystem. For the right price, they'd adjust inspection records, hide minor flaws, or slip a concubine's name onto the imperial schedule. Some developed long-term arrangements, becoming a concubine's eyes and ears outside the inner quarters. But these alliances carried risk. During the Ming dynasty, a eunuch caught smuggling letters for a concubine was flayed alive in the palace square. The hierarchy was merciless. Top-tier consorts had private kitchens and could receive family visits. Mid-rank concubines shared dormitories with 5 others. At the bottom, forgotten women bleached menstrual rags in courtyards alongside servants. Promotion often came through violence. One Qing concubine allegedly strangled a rival with her own sash during a friendly wrestling match. Pregnancy triggered both celebration and terror. A concubine carrying the emperor's child immediately moved to high-security quarters, where eunuchs tasted her food for poison. Successful births meant a lifetime pension. Stillbirths prompted investigations for foul play. The stakes grew unimaginably high when a son survived. Suddenly, a minor concubine's relatives might receive government posts, her brothers exempted from taxes. This system poisoned dynasties from within. Concubine factions backed different princes, creating succession crises. Some emperors, exhausted by the scheming, retreated from the harem altogether, which only intensified the infighting. The walls glittered with jade and gold, but the real currency was information. A whispered secret could vault a woman from obscurity to power, just as a careless word could doom generations. For all its opulence, the harem operated like a particularly elegant prison, complete with inmate gangs, corrupt guards, and brutal survival economics. Women who entered as political pawns sometimes became master players, leveraging their wits against a system designed to keep them docile. Their victories were quiet but profound. A son educated by the best tutors, a nephew appointed to the salt monopoly, a family name surviving the next purge. In the harem, intimacy wasn't about affection. It was warfare by other means. The unchosen concubines wasted away in golden silence. Their days followed an endless rhythm, waking in shared dormitories, eating meals of precisely measured luxury, staring at walls painted with scenes they'd never experience. Some kept wooden counting sticks hidden beneath mattresses, notching each moon cycle that passed without summons. The system had no use for aging women who'd never served. By 30, unchosen concubines lost their delicate meals, relegated to coarse rice and pickled vegetables. Their silks were redistributed to newer girls. Imperial physicians stopped checking their pulses. Yet leaving wasn't an option. Returned concubines might dishonor their families. Worse, they could leak palace secrets. So they stayed, ghosts haunting their own lives. Some were reassigned to menial tasks, sorting the emperor's laundry, polishing unused jewelry, or teaching embroidery to children they'd never bear. Others became human record keepers, memorizing ancestral rites too insignificant for written records. A favored few might serve as companions to elderly dowagers, though this meant absorbing their bitterness over forgotten glories. The loneliness deformed them. Palace records describe unchosen concubines developing peculiar rituals. One arranged pebbles into elaborate cityscapes. Another held conversations with her reflection. During outbreaks of illness, these women were last to receive treatment. Their deaths often went unnoticed for days, the smell of decay the only announcement. Attempts to escape were rare and catastrophic. A Ming dynasty concubine who disguised herself as a eunuch was discovered when guards noticed her smooth cheeks lacked the distinctive folds of castration scars. Her punishment, being sewn alive into a sack of starving rats, became a warning tale told in whispers. Ironically, the system's brutality sometimes spared them. Concubines who aged past fertility were occasionally permitted to leave for nunneries, where their literacy made them valuable scribes. A handful secured positions as palace teachers, drilling new girls in the arts they'd perfected without reward. Their true curse was knowledge. These women understood exactly what they'd lost, not love, but purpose. A chosen concubine risked poison plots or political downfall, but at least she mattered. The unchosen simply faded, their names erased from rosters, their families receiving no word until the palace sent back their untouched dowries years later. In the end, their fate was crueler than any punishment. Not banishment, not execution, irrelevance. The pavilions echoed with their footsteps long after they'd stopped being counted as human. The harem's greatest horror wasn't its violence, but its capacity to make lives disappear without leaving marks. The harem's rules didn't just govern bedrooms, they warped an empire. What began as protocols to protect the throne eventually poisoned it, creating rulers who either raged against the system or surrendered to its dehumanizing logic. Emperors who grew up surrounded by these rituals inherited their contradictions, absolute power paired with shocking emotional isolation. Some rebelled spectacularly. The Ming Jiajing emperor kept detailed logs of his nightly violations, sleeping past allotted times, conversing past approved topics, deliberately choosing menstruating concubines. His disobedience wasn't about passion, but protest, a fury that eventually saw him nearly assassinated by a coalition of concubines and eunuchs. Other rulers went the opposite direction, like the Qing Daoguang emperor, who reduced his harem to just 4 women, hoping simplicity would prevent intrigue. Both approaches failed. The system wasn't designed for moderation. Meanwhile, the harem's tentacles reached into ministries and battlefields. During the Tang dynasty, one concubine's nephew received command of 30,000 troops, despite never holding a sword. A Song dynasty finance minister got his post because his sister memorized the emperor's favorite tea temperature. These appointments weren't corruption, they were the system working as intended, where bedroom access translated directly to political capital. Governance became secondary to pleasure politics. The cracks appeared in small ways first. Eunuchs assigned to time-keep imperial couplings began selling extra minutes. Concubines bribed physicians to fake fertility reports. Then came the dynasty-breaking consequences, succession crises when harem factions produced rival heirs, embezzlement scandals when concubines' families monopolized tax collection, even peasant revolts sparked by rumors of emperors ignoring flood relief to enjoy new Persian sex techniques. Ironically, the system meant to preserve purity bred decadence. Isolated from normal human connections, later emperors sought increasingly extreme sensations. One commissioned a rotating bed that could hold 12 women at once. Another demanded concubines dress as mythical creatures, complete with grafted antlers and surgically elongated tongues. The rituals created monsters, even as they tried to control them. In the end, the harem's greatest victims were the dynasties themselves. The Qianlong emperor spent more on perfumes for his consorts than naval defense. The Chongzhen emperor was receiving reports about concubine pregnancies when rebel forces breached the palace gates. The lesson was clear. A system that reduced human relationships to rigid protocols couldn't adapt when real crises came. These bedroom rules outlasted their purpose, continuing long after everyone forgot why they existed. Later generations followed them like sleepwalkers, performing inspections and timing couplings while barbarians massed at the borders. The harem didn't fall because it was immoral. It fell because it was inefficient, prioritizing control over adaptability. What remained were just echoes, empty palace corridors where once 1,000 women had plotted, suffered, and disappeared without trace. The Imperial Harem's rules transformed intimacy into bureaucracy. Bedchambers became political arenas where every touch carried consequences, every sigh was monitored. These rituals weren't about pleasure, they were about control, extending the empire's reach into its most private spaces. We see traces of this logic in all rigid systems, the prioritizing of order over human connection, the belief that people can be managed like inventory. The harem's legacy isn't just historical. It's a warning about what happens when power becomes obsessed with its own preservation. If these hidden histories fascinate you, consider subscribing for more unsettling revelations about the past.